What's up, my friends? It is Mr. Gallows, of course, who'd think it was, and welcome back to another music theory video. So guys, for today's video, we're going to take a deep dive into one of my songs because I'm often asked, how do you actually write one of your songs? And while, I'm not going to give away every single secret that I have, I thought it would be really fun to actually show you guys, bring up one of my songs, and actually go into detail about how I compose them and how I actually construct them. Alright, my friends, so here we are in the magic room, and I've brought up one of my songs here to basically show you guys the entire workings of one of my songs, all the details of how I actually construct one of my songs. Now, this song that I brought up for you guys today is Toys. It's the first single that I released for Whiteheart a couple of months ago, and you guys will recognize the song. Right? You recognize that very unique rhythm. And where that unique rhythm comes from is basically all of these different samples here chopped up and puzzle pieced together. You can see how tightly packed they are together. You can see how meticulously pieced together they are. And just to show you guys an example of what I mean here, and again, this is the purpose of this video, to take a deep dive into one of these songs to show you the inner workings of how I actually construct these songs. So like, if I were to take this sample up here, for example, right, and we'll bring it down here to this lower level here, so I can extend it out. And you see how I've made the sample longer there, right? So if I were just to play this sample by itself, right? You just have the two hits, the two extended hits. You have, right? But what I've done is I've just taken the very first section here, the very first piano hit, right? And made it that small. So now when I play it, it's just one little piano hit, right? And so now what I'll do is I'll stick it back up there, and that'll be kind of like my first, that'll be my first sample, my first kind of sound in the entire rhythm of the song. And with each one of these individual samples, with each one of these, that's the same thing. I've taken a tiny little section out of each one. So for example, I'll take this one here, I'll move it down, and I'll extend that out. You can see that this was actually just one little sample by itself. Boom, just one little hit. And we'll put it back there. We'll take this one down here, right? We'll extend that one out. We'll do that a little bit further so you guys can see. We'll play this sample as it is. But what I've done, again, is I've just taken that first section, that first piano hit, just that, and I've pieced it together with other samples. So now when you take a larger, when you zoom out and you take a larger look, a look at the larger picture here, you can see that every single one of these samples is exactly like that. And some are shorter, some are larger, some are medium sized, some are super small and jam-packed together. But the point is that when you puzzle piece these all together, they make brand new samples. So what I'll do here is I'll keep the beats alive, but what I'll do is I'll mute everything on here except for just that top layer of samples right here. And if we let that play out, sounds pretty cool, right, by itself, right? But then what we'll do is we'll unmute the second layer here. And again, these are all just tiny little pieces of bigger samples that have been pieced back together, right? So now we'll unmute the second layer and we'll go back and play it again. Right? Again, sounds pretty cool, but it's not quite complete yet. So what I've done, again, is I've just it's all about layering. Remember that video I made on Bob Ross and how he taught me to layer songs, right? You could go with just one or two samples and just do, one or two lines, and it would still sound pretty cool. But what would happen if you just took all this empty space right here and filled it in, right? That's how I write songs, is I see, like, if we take, for example, like this section of the song here, and you see all this empty space in between these. You see all the empty space in between these samples? I look at that as things that can be filled in. Most musicians won't really pay attention to that. They'll just be like, well, I have those one or two samples and I'll just use that to make a song. But I see all this empty space in between here, and I'm like, I can fill that up with stuff to give my song layering and depth and give it a real resonant tone, So now, with all this empty space here, let's unmute the third layer of samples here and play that now with a third layer of samples. Right, now it has a little bit more depth to it, but it's still not right yet, So let's go ahead and unmute the fourth layer now, the fourth layer of samples, and play it again. See, and you get that, again, just like I was talking about before, about how some samples were larger, some are medium sized, some are small, some are super small. This is an example right here of the layers that are super small right here. You just have that one tone, and it's played out, they're jam-packed right next to each other. So when you get that one just simple note, boop, 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 and you fit it together, you get that da-da-da-da-da-da-da, you get that kind of Morse code sound to your song. So if I play it again, listen for that da-da-da-da-da song, and you'll see what I'm talking about. See that? So what happens is, if you change the size of the samples, you can also get different sounds. The larger ones will kind of play out as large resonant tones. The medium ones will kind of work as single piano, synth, or Rhodes kind of hits. And if you make them really small and jam-pack them together, you get that sound. And I really love that Morse code kind of sound. It's a really unique aspect of my songs. You guys will recognize those rapid tones from a lot of my songs. I use it all the time because it provides that it creates that really unique sound that's you can distinguish it from other EDM artists and from other chill hop artists. If you hear that rapid Morse code stuff, yeah, it's probably one of my songs. So I just love that little addition to all of my samples. But again, even with 4 layers, right, it's not quite complete. I got a lot of empty space in here. So now what I'll do is I'll unmute the 5th layer here. And, why not we'll do the 6th layer too, because down here on the 6th layer, I've added in a harp, and I've added in, more kind of pianos and more kind of synthy Rhodes kind of sounds to it. And now if we play that with 6 layers of samples, right, you get this sound. Now it sounds complete. Now it sounds really full, right? But I got another layer to add in yet, and that's the bass layer. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute the bass layer here. And this bass sample here again, this sample right here, which is highlighted in the yellow, that is also taken from a bigger, longer bass line. And I've taken just one section that works particularly well for this song. So the bass section sounds like this. That's it. Do-do, 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 do-do. And what I've done is I've taken that sample and I've pieced it together 4 times across the riff. So now when we add the bass in, now you get that funk layer to it. Because now across all those cool piano and synth and Rhodes samples, now we have that boom, 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 and it adds that funk kind of aspect to it. And again, all I'm doing here is I'm seeing all of these empty spaces in between the samples, and I'm filling them in with other samples, and it creates depth in your song. It creates a lot of depth to it. So now we'll go ahead and unmute everything, and the only thing left I have to unmute here is the hi-hat, right? And now when we play the song, right? Now it sounds full, it sounds just awesome, right? Because what you've done is you've taken smaller parts of samples that you think that sound cool, and you piece them together to make brand new samples. That's what it's all about. That's how you write music with samples. A lot of people will just take the sample as it is, and they'll just copy and paste it, copy and paste it, copy and paste it, and they'll just play it out as is. And sometimes you can get some cool sounds with that, maybe. But I find it much more interesting and much more challenging as a songwriter to actually just take these tiny little pieces that you like and piece them together to make new samples. And it's a really, really meticulous surgical process, as I'm sure you guys can tell by the way that I've explained it here, right? Is that you have to take these little pieces and you have to make sure that each piece lines up with the next one, and the next one that you do, and the next one. And I'll zoom in here a little bit more so you guys can see. You have to make sure that each one that you're putting up here lines up with this, and this lines up with this, and this lines up with this one lines up with this one, this one lines up with this one, and each has to be put together at exactly the right increment to make samples. Because if you were just to take all these individual samples and just kind of throw them up on your beat, it's not going to match up at all. They would sound just, it would sound just like a big mess, right? Like a big kind of like somebody literally just threw a bunch of samples up with a beat and tried to make it work. What you have to do is you have to take each individual piece and surgically place it together with each other individual sample to make sure that they work and they all sound wonderful together. The other thing that's really important is creating a distinct pattern in your songs. So we've talked now about how you piece the samples together to make new samples, to make a brand new song. But the other thing that I'd like to do also is set up patterns in my songs. So the first pattern that I do is what I've been playing for you so far. Right? And then right here it changes. You can see that I've dropped some of the samples away in this next part. The bass is gone, the hi-hat is gone, a lot of the layering that I've put in is gone, and what happens is when you suddenly drop those layers out, the pattern changes. And then you bring the first section back again and repeat what you did in the first section that I played for you, and now you have a distinct pattern, right? And all you gotta do, sometimes all it takes is to drop some of those samples out, maybe add a couple of new ones in, and then you can create this kind of almost like mini interlude. That's what it essentially is, right? And so if I go further on in the song, that song will continue like that for a while, where it'll be the first part, then the second part, the little mini interlude there, then it'll go back to the first part again, the mini interlude, and then you have this interlude here where I took the beat out, and then it goes into a brand new pattern where I've kind of pieced the samples together in a completely different way. So what'll happen is the beat will drop off for a moment, you'll have another mini interlude with just a couple of samples, and then it'll go into a completely different rhythm with samples together, the same samples, the same exact samples, but just pieced together in a different way. So listen to how this changes up. And again, I'm using the same exact samples. It's just that when they're pieced together in different ways, some of them are in different positions, some of them are in different bars, so they have different effects on them, and they're pieced, the way that they're arranged is vastly different from how I had it in the first or the second section. See, a lot of IDM, EDM, chill hop artists today, they'll take the same pattern and they'll just repeat the pattern over and over again. What I like to do is I like to switch things up. I like to have, one specific rhythm for one section of the song, then another specific rhythm, and then another specific rhythm, and another specific rhythm. And then I piece those all together to make these really, really complex songs. And where I learned that from was playing math rock. Because when I was writing math rock songs from a math rock band out in San Diego, I had this kind of really distinct songwriting style that would often, get my bandmates a little worked up because they would want to repeat parts. They would say, oh, that's a really cool section of the song, why don't you just repeat that and we'll have a couple of little, changes up in the middle. And I said, no, what I want to do is I want to write one section of the song, then write another section that goes with it, and another completely different section that goes with that, and another completely different section that goes with that, and then string them all together, almost like something you'd hear in an orchestra piece, right, where it's all different kinds of sections stringed together into one long song. And that's where I learned that from. Math rock, that's where math rock influences my music, is that constant change up in rhythms and patterns and beats and everything. And as you can tell, sounds a lot like math rock, doesn't it? Because you could play those same kinds of patterns and rhythms on a guitar as well. If you just did that with one guitar and a really, really badass drummer, you'd essentially have math rock. So that's what I've done here, is I've incorporated all that math rock influence, tone, sound, rhythm, and patterning into IDM music, right? And so again, we're about to enter into the chorus. We're going to go through just an interlude here, an interlude section, and then it'll go into the chorus. And then what I've done for the chorus is, once again, I've pieced the samples together in a completely different way, in a completely different pattern. And what you can see, this is the chorus section, and you can see that I've taken the samples, and what I've done basically is I've extended a lot of them out. Before they were really, really short, right, and kind of pieced together. And you can still see there's some short little samples in there as well to provide that distinct rhythm that I was talking about. But what I've done is I've taken a lot of the samples and I've kind of extended them. And what that does is it adds a lot of resonant tone. So before, the samples would just be one single piano hit, bum, or bump, bump, bump. But what I've done is I've taken the sample and extended it longer so that it's bum, and you have that resonant tone. You have that sustained tone, right, rather than all chopped up. So this is the interlude part. And then the chorus. And you can see that I've got a different bass line in there, as well as selecting a couple of new samples, but basically keeping the same piano samples, but just extending them out so you can hear more of them. Instead of being single hits, they're drawn out so you can hear basically the entire pattern of the piano. And with that bass change up, now you've created something completely different, but it goes so well with the rest of the song, right? It's so well. It's the same thing, except just done in a different way. And everything just kind of has a nice flow, right? Instead of that super mathy, those super mathy rhythms that were at the beginning of the song, that were like that super mathy stuff, now it flows. It has a nice kind of flow to end out, to finish up the song. And that is essentially how I write my music, is that every single section is the same but completely different. So you keep the same patterns and rhythms and tones, but the more you switch it up, the more you can actually change things. And even though you change things drastically, they still sound the same and they still go together. And that's basically my my own method of songwriting. So my friends, that's my logic anyway on how I compose and construct my songs. But now comes the best part of the video where I turn it over to all of you guys. So have you guys got your own specific method for composing and constructing songs? And if so, leave all of your thoughts and opinions down below in the great white void. I would love to hear from you guys. And as always, until next we meet, take care, and I'll see you guys back here for the next music theory video very soon. Peace.